Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. 2 weeks ago I released 7 major events before the Harry Potter story started, the first part of a 4-part series where I discuss events that took place prior to the books and films. Harry Potter lore is a lot deeper than some people realize, so today we're going to be winding the clocks back once again and exploring 7 more significant events in Harry Potter canon. The last video left us in the early part of the 13th century, and today we'll be picking things up in the latter half. But before we get started, I just want to mention that only 28.6% of you are subscribed, so if you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing to support the channel. Let's get into it. Wizards' Council is formed, 13th century. It's pretty early on in the Harry Potter books that we're first introduced to the Ministry of Magic, the primary form of government in the magical world, at least in the UK. Like a Muggle government, the Ministry's responsibilities are vast, as they are the primary body that attempts to sustain law and order in the magical world. However, what some people may not know is that prior to the Ministry of Magic's existence, there was a governmental body called the Wizards' Council that governed Wizarding Britain. It was also the longest-serving form of government in magical history. However, the Wizards' Council also lacked structure, which meant that it was only a matter of time until their antiquated system would need to be reintroduced. Because of growing concerns surrounding wizard-muggle affairs and the introduction of the International Statute of Secrecy in 1692, the wizarding community realized they would need a more structured government moving forward. Creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is a phrase that gets thrown around quite a bit in the Harry Potter fandom. Sure, it's the name of the first book and film, but it's also known as the small crimson gem created by Nicolas Flamel, a French scribe born in the year 1330. One of the main functions of the Philosopher's Stone was to turn any metal into gold, which could have made anyone who held it in their possession very rich. But while that may sound impressive, that was only the stone's second most important capability. With a magical artifact like the Philosopher's Stone in your hands, you could have eternal life. Flamel, along with his wife Perenelle, were able to produce an elixir of life from the stone, allowing them to live ludicrously long lives. In fact, both of them would have been able to live forever, but Flamel, aware of the dangers of what could happen if the stone fell into the wrong hands, destroyed it. The best part about the Philosopher's Stone, it may even exist outside of Harry Potter. I did not invent the concept of the Philosopher's Stone, which is a legendary substance that was once believed to be real, and the true goal of alchemy. The properties of my Philosopher's Stone conform to most of the attributes the ancients ascribed to it. The stone was believed to turn base metals into gold, and also to produce the elixir of life, which could make you immortal. Genuine alchemists, the forerunners of chemists and physicists such as Sir Isaac Newton and the real Nicolas Flamel, sought, sometimes over lifetimes, to discover the secret of its creation. The Dementors are created. The dark wizard that went by the name Acristis is probably the most vile wizard that you've never heard of. A practitioner of the worst kinds of dark magic imaginable, Acristis walked the earth in the 15th century. No one knows where Acristis was originally from, but what we do know is that at one point in his life he decided to embark on a journey. And it was on this journey that Acristis eventually stumbled upon what we now know to be the island of Azkaban. At the time, the island had no infrastructure to speak of. It was a barren island. But it didn't take long for all of that to change, as Acristis decided that this was the perfect place to take his dark arts experiments to the next level. Hoping to keep the location of the island, which was located in the North Sea, a secret, Acristis kicked things off by placing concealment charms on the island, meaning that no one would be able to intentionally find it. Shortly thereafter, Acristis began his dark arts experiments by luring Muggle sailors to the island, then torturing and eventually murdering them. It has been said that before ever stepping foot on the island, Acristis was mad, but that after spending some time there, he became totally insane, completely losing touch with reality. He became so wrapped up and enthralled in his experimentation with dark magic that he had lost his mind, and the poor sailors that he lured to the island witnessed it firsthand. In his madness, it has been speculated that Acristis either unwittingly or perhaps intentionally created what we now know to be Dementors. Dementors are among the foulest creatures that walk this earth. They infest the darkest, filthiest places. They glory in decay and despair. They drain peace, hope, and happiness out of the air around them. Even Muggles feel their presence, though they can't see them. Get too near a Dementor, and every good feeling, every happy memory, will be sucked out of you. As for how he created the Dementors, well, that's still very much up for debate. However, if you want my opinion, you should check out my video, The Truth Behind How Dementors Are Created. It wasn't until Acristus died, and the concealment charms he had placed on the island had worn off, that the island, along with all of the Dementors on it, were discovered. Founding of Gringotts. Gringotts was founded in the year 1474 by a goblin who went by the name, you guessed it, Gringott. Little is known about the goblin Gringott and his formative years, or even how old he was when he founded the bank that would become the safest place for valuables in the wizarding world. What we do know is that he is featured on his own chocolate frog card, alongside the likes of famous witches and wizards such as Albus Dumbledore and Merlin. In a small way, this signifies the incredible accomplishment Gringott achieved by creating the first ever bank for magical society. The bank itself is located on the north side of the hidden locale, Diagon Alley, a street magically concealed from muggles and only visited by those who are part of the wizarding world. Accessible via the wizarding pub, the Leaky Cauldron, Gringotts is one of the most frequented magical establishments within central London. Immediately noticeable to anyone who steps foot into Diagon Alley, Gringotts is taller than every other shop on the street, and has a brilliant white exterior with a set of bronze outer doors. Then, just inside the bronze exterior doors is a second set of inner doors, silver in material and colour, with the following words of warning engraved upon them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned. Beware of finding more than treasure there. Creation of the Wizengamot, 16th century. The Wizengamot is the highest court of law and parliament in the British wizarding world, serving as a combination of a Supreme Court and governing council. The court dates back to the 1500s, where it functioned within the Wizards' Council. Comprised of around 50 members who wear plum-coloured robes embroidered with a silver W when in session, the Wizengamot is responsible for handling major legal cases, including criminal trials, and acts as the final court of appeal. It also plays a legislative role, with the power to create and enforce laws within the wizarding community. The Wizengamot convenes within the Ministry of Magic, specifically in Courtroom 10, located in the Ministry's Department of Magical Law Enforcement. This courtroom is described as a large, dark, dungeon-like chamber with benches arranged in rows where Wizengamot members sit during trials. The court process is overseen by a presiding head known as the Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, the group's highest-ranking member. The Chief Warlock ensures that judicial and legislative proceedings, including trials and debates, are conducted fairly and efficiently, at least in theory. Founding of Diagon Alley, 16th century. Nobody really knows the exact founding date of Diagon Alley. We know that Gringotts Wizarding Bank, located in Diagon Alley, was established in 1474, just a century after the famous economic crash that shook the wizarding world to its core. Therefore, it would make sense if Diagon Alley developed after the goblins established such a massive financial centre. After all, Gringotts would eventually become one of the most important daily fixtures in the entire wizarding world of Britain, with hundreds of witches and wizards regularly visiting it. Establishing an apothecary or one shop nearby would have been a great way to catch customers who had galleons to spend. But others think that Diagon Alley got its start on the day the Leaky Cauldron opened its doors. After all, it's written within the pub's very address, number 1 Diagon Alley. The pub was established by Daisy Doddridge, its first landlady, in the early 1500s, with the purpose of serving as a gateway between the non-wizarding world and Diagon Alley. It features a bar, several private parlour rooms, and a spacious dining area. To muggles, the pub now appears as a dilapidated old shopfront on Charing Cross Road. However, this wasn't always the case. Before the Statute of Secrecy, muggle visitors were not turned away and were welcomed just as warmly as wizards. So I guess the true founding date of Diagon Alley really depends on how you define its establishment. Was Diagon Alley founded the day that the first pub opened its doors, or was it only truly Diagon Alley once it had been established as a proper shopping district? I suspect that the part of London that would eventually become Diagon Alley must have always been popular with local witches and wizards. Perhaps even then, when it was just a mud-filled street with a few cobblestone patches, Ollivander's one shop and a few other magical vendors decided to plant their roots. However, I suspect that the area must have eventually become so well known amongst wizards that the goblins of the era decided to construct Gringotts Bank there, and then all of the other shops, which Harry and his friends knew so well, followed suit. Goblin Rebellion of 1612. It's no surprise that the wizarding and goblin communities have never seen eye to eye, both literally and figuratively. And so because of this, there have been numerous instances throughout history in which conflict broke out. One such conflict being the Goblin Rebellion of 1612. We're not quite certain about the exact location, but it seems that this armed conflict arose in or around Hogsmeade Village. Here, the goblin forces took an inn as their base, and ravaged the nearby buildings, setting many of them on fire. The exact number of lives laid down on both sides has been lost to the years, but the casualties were remarkably high, at least according to Hogwarts' 5th year History of Magic class. And when we look at the exact cause of this rebellion, there's no shortage of reasons for why the goblins would have started it. At a glance, the average goblin was far more important to the lives of wizards and witches around England. Goblins forged the most powerful weapons, indestructible armor, and through their natural propensity for hoarding gold, goblins basically kept the entire wizarding economy moving forward. And yet, witches and wizards looked down on them wherever they went. Not only that, they almost always refused to teach them the ways of wand lore, which meant that goblins had to accomplish their magical feats with the far more difficult and more dangerous technique of wandless magic. Even the highest court in Britain, the Wizengamot, refused to allow a goblin a seat. Without fair representation, it's likely that the goblins decided enough was enough, and went on a rampage in the year 1612. But unfortunately for the goblin community, their rebellion only made matters worse. In response to the display of violence in Hogsmeade, the wizarding community of Britain convened, and created a series of laws that restricted non-human magical creatures. The harshest among them was the new Code of Wand to Use, which the Wizards' Council passed less than 2 decades after the rebellion. This restricted wands to human wizards, and made it a crime for goblins, house elves, giants, and other non-humans to wield them. While human wizards simply hoarded wand lore in the centuries before, now it was actually illegal for goblins to study and possess wands. At a glance, you can see how this law made it almost impossible for goblins to defend themselves from wand-armed wizards and witches. But if you think about it more carefully, the restriction on wand ownership would completely hinder the ability of goblins to develop independent of the wizarding community, and meant that they would always depend on them. And this was really only the beginning. But that's enough for today's video. Make sure to check out part 1 of this series if you haven't already, and be on the lookout for parts 3 and 4 in the coming weeks. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.